Go.
Okay. Good morning. Welcome to this special and unusual meeting of the Calaveras Board of Supervisors. On behalf of the board, I want to thank county staff for what they're doing, for still providing the services under these most unusual circumstances. And to the public, I do want to thank you for your resiliency and helping us move through this bad dream, and hope that all of you have your hands in your mask and keeping safe distance. So this is a first for all of us, and let's proceed as normal as we can. And if possible, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Unmute, supervisors. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please do roll call? This is also new.
I will. Supervisor Toffenelli,
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi,
Present.
Supervisor Callaway,
Yes.
Supervisor Mills,
Yes.
and Supervisor Stopper.
Yes.
Thank you.
And to the public, if you would like to watch this, get your coffee and go to youtube.com user Calaveras Community Television. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, so staff announcements. This is a time for county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public. I am not aware of any staff that is online to make any comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move to the regular agenda. There is no consent agenda today. Please proceed.
Okay. Okay, so the first item on the regular agenda is from Health and Human Services Agency to receive an informational briefing on California Governor's Executive Orders N2720 and N3220 and provide staff policy direction.
What we're doing is trying to get technology-wise staff.
So I believe that Kristen Stranger is dialing in as we speak, and that Dr. Kaleda will be standing by as well for any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Might take just a moment.
Hi, this is Kristen. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Max. Thank you. Oh, they can see me. That's okay. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Max. Appreciate it so much. Thank you to County IT. Just have to put that out there. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is Kristen Stranger, Health and Human Services Agency. Today joining me virtually is also Lee Kimball from HHSA, as well as Dr. Kaleda on the line as well. So the purpose of today's briefing is to provide high-level information on local efforts to respond to Governor's Order Executive Order N2720 and N3220, which address serving vulnerable populations in our community in the wake of COVID-19. In addition, at the end of the conclusion of this briefing, staff will be seeking policy direction from the board on next steps. A little bit of background, N2720, Governor's Executive Order, requires the California Department of Social Services and the California Department of Public Health to work in consultation with the Health and Human Services Agency, counties, and other local jurisdictions to respond to vulnerable populations during the COVID-19 pandemic. N3220, Governor's Executive Order, provides local flexibility for local governments to respond to the emergency homelessness fund, to spend our local emergency homelessness funding on immediate solutions tailored to combat COVID-19 and its impacts on the vulnerable populations. The purpose of these orders was for local jurisdictions to respond to COVID-19 in an effort to protect public health, the safety by addressing vulnerable populations, including homeless community members that may warrant isolation in a non-congregate sheltering setting. The efforts to do so also support the governor's stay-at-home order. In addition, our own health officer, Dr. Dean Kaleda, also issued a local order on March 27, 2020, that implemented the governor's stay-at-home order requiring all Calaveras County residents to stay.
So it looks like we're paused at the moment. Kristen, we can't hear you. Kristen, can you disconnect and call back in, because you're frozen there and we can't hear anything and there's no movement. Okay, should be just a moment, board.
Hello?
Yay!
I'm sorry, I don't know why the internet kicked me off, but I'm back. Okay, so getting back to what I was saying. So we know that those without stable housing, I got it, Max, it works now, thank you, are more likely to utilize emergency rooms, admit into inpatient hospitalizations, and have longer lengths of stay. This project is called Project Room Key, and it was officially launched on April 3rd, 2020. CSAC, which is the California State Association of Counties, as well as other various California county associations, have been closely engaged with the administration on all aspects of its development. In the current climate of COVID-19 and the impact it's having on the healthcare system, every level of government is mobilizing to respond to the pandemic through various efforts, including the one I'm detailing for the board today. So to go over the proposed plan that has been preliminarily been developed, the proposed plan includes the intention to procure hotel and motel rooms through lease agreements for isolation purposes only, utilizing templates and technical assistance provided to the county by the state. The goal is to procure approximately 75 isolation units. Within placing in community members into those isolation units, there is a priority of populations. They include those who have tested positive for COVID-19, who do not require hospitalization but need isolation, including those exiting from hospitals. Number 2 is those who have been exposed or potentially exposed to COVID-19 but do not require hospitalization. Number 3 is those persons needing to practice social distancing as a precautionary measure, particularly for high-risk groups, such as people over 65 with certain underlying health conditions, such as respiratory, compromised immunities, chronic diseases, etc. And the number 4th population is other homeless populations that are not among the foregoing categories, but whose living situation makes them unable to adhere to social distancing guidance. In addition to the isolation rooms, there will be wraparound support services, which will include, but are not limited to, food, security, janitorial efforts, etc. In addition, for those that are already isolated, who are already isolated, they will be provided resources so that they can remain comfortable within their current isolation. Those resources could include comfort kits as well as shelf-stable foods. All requests for services will come through the coordinated entry system, which is an existing system for accessing homeless services currently in existence. All individuals will be screened for services. The limited resources that I was detailing above will be for those that cannot isolate when necessary or aren't currently housed and are from the county in accordance with the prioritized populations I previously mentioned. The coordinated entry system is already fielding numerous calls for requests for service and have seen an uptick from Calaveras County community members seeking services. They are currently utilizing the existing resources that the board previously approved, such as the Homeless Emergency Aid Program services from later in 2019. So once somebody is put in an isolation room, they will be provided a detailed packet of resources and information about how to care for themselves. This includes information about how to use telehealth services, again, trying to promote the social distancing and mitigate the impact to the healthcare system. They will be regularly checked on as part of the wraparound support services. The expectation is that those that are in an isolation room are expected to adhere to all local laws and hotel policies and procedures. Those will be gone over prior to one entering an isolation room, and the expectation is that individuals comply. So how is this funded? The state has made available about approximately $150 million of new funding. In addition, they have provided great flexibility to utilize existing homeless funding sources and opportunities for FEMA reimbursement. What we know currently in terms of what that funding could look like for Calaveras is we have been awarded approximately $71,000 from our continuum of care of $100 million of that first $150 million I was just detailing. And we also have access, amount unknown at this current time, to approximately the other $50 million, which would be administered by the California Department of Social Services. This funding is in addition to the flexibility to utilize that we have been provided to utilize the approximate $550,000 of homeless emergency aid and homeless housing assistance and prevention program, better known as HAP funding. The intention is to minimize these use of existing funding sources such as HEAP and HAP, as these funds were identified for addressing overarching housing and homelessness needs over the next 5 years prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. FEMA has also made it, as part of Project Room Key, FEMA has also made it known that there will be up to 75% reimbursement for particular populations and particular services provided under Project Room Key. In addition, CDS has indicated that they are looking to provide additional assistance for unreimbursed funding. So the process that we've been looking to understand is if the local planning efforts discover difficulty in providing these wraparound services, there is a process for county staff through the Emergency Operations Center to request additional mission requests through the state processes and up to the state to garner that additional assistance that may be necessary if, again, there's a supportive services that we find it difficult to procure. The state's role in all of these efforts is to provide technical assistance to local entities. Just to be clear, there are multiple funding sources coming all at once, and so there will be increased administrative requirements and increased administrative services being provided to ensure that we are properly tracking the funding, spending it in accordance with the guidelines, as well as making sure that the proper documentation is necessary to secure as much FEMA reimbursement as possible. A little bit of detail about what the other counties are doing. We know, given that this is coming through the continuum of care, that our partners in Tuolumne and Mariposa are looking to execute programs similarly modeled to what I'm describing for you currently. So what you will see from staff in the future. Staff have diligently been working to understand the regulatory and fiscal requirements for the plan of operation that I just provided at a high level detail. Given that we have been made aware that this is not a mandate from the state, but rather a strong recommendation, we are seeking policy direction on if staff may proceed to address this critical need in the wake of COVID-19. If that policy direction is given today to staff, you will see a number of agreements and contracts, leases, various funding sources that will come shortly thereafter to roll out the components of this project. You will see requests for to seek grants, which are in accordance with these funding streams as well, in accordance to the new grant policy that was just passed. We would be utilizing our standing board item that we do have during all regular board meetings that we utilize to provide updates on COVID-19. We can utilize that venue to provide regular updates to the board and to the public. But we do request flexibility as this is brand new and being rolled out quickly by the state to all locals. At this point, I can take any specific questions for myself, Dr. Kaleda, Lee, or anybody else on the line.
Do any of the board members have questions before we move on to Dr. K? Or before I go? Yes, Supervisor Garamendi.
Sorry about that, Madam Chairwoman. I couldn't quite figure out how to raise my hand on this, but I'm sure I'll figure it out by the end of this call. Kristen, thank you very much for the briefing, and thank you for all the work that all the team of HHS is doing. We know you guys are going above and beyond. I've been getting notified that we're having increased needs for food in some of our more vulnerable communities. Some of our local distributors are seeing an increase in people lining up for the food banks, especially places like Mountain Ranch that works with the Resource Connection. What are we doing to make sure that we keep people fed?
So this question is a little bit bigger, obviously, than the project that I'm going over, but I can tell you that within the Emergency Operations Center, there is a advanced planning group that is working on addressing feeding needs for our community. And it includes a number of partners who are working through those processes and trying to connect. You've seen a number of resource guides go out, making community members aware of where one can obtain food assistance. We have done outreach in addition to let people know about how to access CalFresh nutrition supplements as part of existing programs and services, as well as closer connections and collaborations with the food bank, as well as other community organizations such as Common Ground. Much of that is being led through the Emergency Operations Center.
Supervisor Garamendi, are you done?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
For the
sorry.
moment.
I've got the clerk here trying to teach me how to use this computer. So,
Supervisor Stopper?
Kristen, you talked about a raised need for the homeless, which is what we're talking about right now. Is there any idea about how many are in our community that are asking for tests or looking for places to stay right now?
So I'll take that question in two parts. In terms of individuals who lack stable housing, who would be seeking testing if they are exhibiting symptoms, they would be seeking services similar to anybody else through the community. And that's the way that that information is being communicated when they are coming through the coordinated entry. That is seeking services through your primary care provider. And then if you do not have one, reaching out to the hospital and going through the traditional system. We are educating individuals when they do reach out to the coordinated entry, which is the single point of entry for accessing all services, of this information that I just detailed for you now. I don't have exact numbers on how many people have reached out for additional services. Again, we did reach out to Sierra Hope, which facilitates the coordinated entry, and they have seen upticks for isolation requests and hotel rooms. A lot of this is also coming too because the governor has been giving very regular updates to the state. And so individuals needing these services are reaching out saying, hey, I heard about this. What can I do to access these types of services? So for now, what we're doing is processing those requests through existing venues, which are the HEAP and HEAP funding that I detailed for you before that were funded from previously awarded to our county. And then if we were to receive policy direction to continue to move forward with on this project, this would be an additional resource we could provide.
Supervisor Stopper? Yeah,
Are there, do you have specific sites when it comes to the hotels/motels that we're already looking at for this?
Yes, so we have been in consultation with, obviously as part of our preparation and planning efforts prior to bringing to your board, we wanted to see if there were any individual entities, any hotels or motels that would be willing to work with us. And so we have secured, not secured, but we have identified interested hotel owners in San Andreas and an Angels Camp at the Travel Lodge, the Angels Inn, and then the Sierra Inn is an owner who has indicated potential interest. Again, so long as there's the wraparound support services that we have been discussing for you today.
And you said $71,000 is the amount that's potentially allocated to Calaveras County right now. Is there any idea how long that will last with those specific places? And I mean, overall, how far can we stretch $71,000?
$71,000 will not go far at all. But let me go back up to the funding component a little bit, because when I was speaking about how there's a plethora of funding sources that are coming from various oversight agencies to all kind of braid together to be able to address this need. So it's not just the approximately $71,000. That's one element that's coming through the continuum of care. That's part of that $100 million that was made available to continuums of care. So our portion is about $71,000. In addition, there's the opportunity for local governments to pursue a portion of the $50 million that's being administered by the California Department of Social Services. And that's in addition to the flexibility to utilize existing funding we already have that's provided to us from another oversight agency, and that's the approximately $550,000 of existing HEAP and HAP monies, which we'd like to try to preserve as much as possible, because that was meant to meet all of our community needs over the 5 years. And that's in addition to the FEMA reimbursement that we could obtain. And then we're looking, obviously, as part of county government, we're advocating for the state to be able to meet the entire budgetary needs of rolling out a project like this. So we would continue those efforts. So right now it's 4-prong, and it'll probably end up growing in terms of the amount of funding sources.
Thank you for the information. Very good.
Supervisor Mills.
Yes, good morning, Kristen. You're working in some uncharted territory here. I have 3 questions. First of all, for those units that have been identified, is there going to be some additional preparation that's going to be needed to be sure that those units are capable of doing the kind of support? That would be question number 1.
Yes, you are 100% correct. So there is, within those supportive services that I just detailed, right, there's a couple of, I just provided a few for examples, but it's quite a laundry list of various services that need to be provided and how to provide those services, making sure that there's proper personal protective equipment, procuring proper sanitation, making sure that the building itself adheres to requirements that the state has rolled out. These properties that we've identified thus far do have the do meet those requirements so far. Again, this is just interest. We've reached out to a number of local hotels just to see who would be interested in working in this venue. And so those entities that we were able to engage in a lease relationship with, and then the support services relationship with, would have to adhere to a number of state requirements. And we would be responsible for working to make sure all of those necessary precautionary measures were put into place as well.
Has there been any thought to how long this would be in place? Are we looking at a 14-day sequestering process? Are we looking at, somewhere out 30 days, 60, 90 days? Has anyone thought about that time window?
So we have thought about it, and you're not going to love this answer, but we don't have an exact answer on it yet, right? So the purpose of the isolation rooms are to basically meet all of those orders that I outlined at the very beginning, right? So if somebody is isolating and they aren't housed and they meet those prioritized populations, they could in essence be there throughout the entire executive order of stay at home, because that is the way that they can be compliant for stay at home. If you've got, so that could be somebody who's homeless. Let me provide you another scenario. These are isolation rooms also for other populations, not just homeless, correct? So if you have an individual, a couple who is maybe has a limited income, and one individual has tested positive and they need to be isolated within the rooms, that could occur just for that time frame that the isolation is warranted, the person recovers, et cetera. So you've got multiple different scenarios that could occur in terms of length of stay.
Thank you for your answer. The last question would be, it's that we're going to be putting this together rather rapidly. If that's the case, what consideration has been there in thought as to how to unwind it when their time is come to, in essence, the executive order ends, or this individual is no longer in need of the services, et cetera? So the unwind portion of it is another question.
Okay. So we have not received very clear guidance yet on what that would look like locally in terms of unwinding. I can tell you the intention is for this project to be in running during the course of the stay-at-home order under the COVID-19 pandemic and with the emergency declarations that have been issued. I do know that we would be covering, as I indicated in the intake process, where we go over what is required, what are the services available. We will also make the individuals aware that this is not something that's meant to be a long-term thing. This is meant to adhere to this order. That would be documented in the various agreements that we are crafting and such in accordance with the state. But that is definitely something that we are working through to get more clarity for the local, not only us, but all local jurisdictions.
I guess as a comment more than anything is to have some concern or consideration for the business owners that are willing to put their properties out to do this, that we don't just, when the order's over, close up, walk away, and they still have other things that have to be dealt with as a result of the presence in their facilities.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills. I really appreciate that comment. That's definitely the purpose of this briefing today, is to help staff understand all the potential concerns going forward so that we can make sure we're properly addressing them. So I have noted that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Andrew, I have also some questions. The 75 units you mentioned at the beginning, is that just for Calaveras that you're trying to find? Yes.
Yes, so the intention based off of the methodology that we're utilizing based off of point in time counts and based off of communications from the state is the goal is approximately 75 isolation units. Again, that's a slightly fluid number. If we need more, it would be expanding the process. And if less, it would be obviously, but it's the same process regardless of the amount of rooms.
Okay. On the telehealth system, how would that be implemented with people who might not have the tools to access that?
So part of the supportive services requires this, requires the consistent check-ins through entities that would be serving these individuals, right? So that could look like somebody coming around with a laptop properly with personal protective equipment in the hotel rooms and helping the individuals to be able to access those telehealth services with a remote computer or a telephone. We will be looking at what the individuals who are being put in the isolation rooms, what their needs are, and trying to meet those needs so that they can care for themselves during this time.
The comment you made about flexibility and really an expediting, if everything has to keep coming to the board and we're not meeting, or it's 2 weeks out, I guess I ask our CAO if there are ways that we can accommodate the need for the leases and the contracts, and that can accommodate the goal of what public health is trying to do and the needs of our community without getting caught up in the bureaucracy of what has to be done. Thank you.
I'm not sure exactly the question, Madam Chair, but
can you do it without bringing it to the board? I mean, if I'm listening to Kristen correctly, we need flexibility. She needs flexibility and being able to expedite any leases or contracts. Is there an overall way, and maybe our council could help with that, so that when it comes time, she can execute it, or she and you can execute it, and it doesn't have to come to the board? Or
so I'll just jump in. My understanding is that Kristen and her team are preparing, or they're already in the process of preparing contracts that would come to the board for the next board meeting, which is next week. That said, at that time, if you wanted to delegate some further authority to Kristen, say to execute additional or future contracts as needed, that's something that we could talk about at that time. It can't be done today as part of this item.
no, I understand. It's I'm just throwing it out there. Okay, are there any other questions at this time from my colleagues? I'd like to, Kristen, if you don't mind, before Dr. K comes, or would you like to have Dr. Kaleda come, and then I'll.
Marita, I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
I raised my hand and
Got it. Thank you. Sorry.
Great
Supervisor.
question, Supervisor Stopper and Mills. And Rita, yours was similar to what I was looking at as far as the contract part of it. But I do have one question, Kristen, and thank you very much and your staff for everything you're doing. What if you get somebody and they've tested positive and you set them up in an isolation room at a local hotel, and then you find out 2 days later they've just walked out? Is there any provisions that we're checking on them, or what happens at that point if they just walk out and disappear?
Yes, so the intention of the program is to provide these isolation rooms so individuals can recover or prevent if they are one of those higher risk populations. So in addition, prior to somebody going into the isolation room, we would be covering with them all of the requirements in terms of understanding that this is an isolation room, meaning one person. It's meant for being able to care for oneself and clearly roll out what the expectation is. You're to abide by the laws, you're to abide by the hotel policies and all of that goes into that. You're not to leave the room unless it's for essential services, as we've detailed before, like the general public. So my point is that we'd be doing everything we could on the front end to really try to mitigate that behavior. You're touching to a point which I'm really glad you brought up, which is this won't be perfect. We are going to have individual situations where, especially given the size in such a quick pace, we will have to deal with situations on a case-by-case basis. We probably engaged we would engage our behavioral health team members to try to help that person understand and utilize some of those engagement processes that we're very well versed in doing, and understanding why it's a good thing to stay in the isolation room. But ultimately, it's not like these are not jail cells. And we don't anticipate operating them like that. But we do anticipate operating them with is a framework that provides for success for the entire project.
Good answer. Thank you.
I think before I open it to public comment, if Dr. Kaleda would like to make some comments.
Is he able to get on?
Yeah.
Oh, there he is.
I don't know if you can hear me. Am I unmuted?
You're
You're there.
unmuted.
Okay, great. Kristen's, of course, the expert in logistics regarding social services, but I have a couple of comments. I do recommend upholding these recommendations to provide homelessness assistance for a couple of reasons, medical and scientific reasons. One is there's an order to shelter at home, to do social distancing for everyone in the community. That's pretty difficult if you don't have a home. If a person were to develop signs or symptoms of illness, be diagnosed with COVID-19 infection, need to be isolated or quarantined, they need a place to do that. The second issue is that this lockdown is not going to last forever. When we reopen, homeless populations are not going to have been adequately able to isolate themselves, and they could serve as a potential source of reinfection to the general public. So those are the medical facts that I think would warrant this kind of effort to get homeless people, out of homeless camps, by local streams, and into shelter that will allow them to participate in social distancing and isolate and quarantine them in the event of illness.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Sure, I can, not on this particular topic. I'd be happy to provide the board with an update on coronavirus in the community, but I'll leave that up to your discretion, Madam Chair.
I very much like you to proceed, Dr. Kaleda.
All right. In California in general, there's been 14,336 confirmed cases of COVID-19 infection, 343 deaths, and 212 cases of COVID-19 among healthcare workers statewide, which is a concerning statistic. In Calaveras County, there have been 5 cases of confirmed COVID-19, 0 deaths, and 2 recovered cases. The original 2 cases identified in Copperopolis have now been retested negative and are considered recovered. The two new cases since last week, one has been in the Valley Springs area, an adult, and the other is an adult up on the Highway 4 corridor in the Arnold-Dorrington area. This person had international travel, so is not considered a case of community transmission. But the other case in Valley Springs, we've been doing a pretty detailed contact investigation, a contact tracing, and we're not finding a clear source of infection in that individual. And so I'm leaning towards that case being considered community transmission, which is a little bit more concerning as well. Testing capability remains strained in Calaveras County and all of the foothill communities, Tuolumne, Amador counties as well. Specimen collection materials are running low. It used to be the testing capability of the laboratories that was the limiting factor. But now that the COVID-19 testing capabilities have been shipped out to state public health laboratories, like our own San Joaquin Public Health Lab that Calaveras County contracts with, and now also the commercial laboratories, the ones that the hospitals and clinics mainly use, Quest Diagnostics, ARUP, LabCorp, these commercial labs are up and running when it comes to doing COVID-19 testing. So that's not the limiting factor anymore. The limiting factor now is the stuff that we use to collect the specimens, the swabs that go in people's noses, the tubes that the swab goes into that contains a special liquid that's called viral transport media. Those mere supplies for testing, collecting specimens are running low. And so we've been working through our mutual aid networks to resupply the hospital and our medical system with those needed testing supplies. Adventist Health Hospital in Sonora was very gracious to loan us 50 test kits that we could start using in addition to our current supply in Calaveras County, and we'll repay them when we get restocked. But we've got shipments coming in, but that's a concern that we're running low on testing supplies to be able to just obtain the specimens themselves. To meet this problem, I have a draft of a health officer order, a mandate to the local medical community to report febrile respiratory illness. If a person has coronavirus infection, they'll develop classic symptoms in the vast majority of cases of a febrile respiratory illness. That means they'll get a fever, cough, shortness of breath, very classic symptomatology. If we can use that symptomatology itself as a marker for those with infection and have the medical providers be required to report that to the health department on a daily basis, we can use that as a surrogate marker for coronavirus infection, even in the absence of testing. It's not perfect, but now that influenza cases are decreasing, those people with a febrile respiratory illness now are going to be more likely to have the novel coronavirus infection. So we're going to start moving towards that type of surveillance system in addition to testing to be able to get a more accurate and real-time handle on the occurrence of disease in our community. Hospital surge capacity is moving forward pretty well at this point. Mark Twain Medical Center has been really good at expanding and flexing and surging their capabilities to care for a potential influx of patients. Like I've talked about before, they've increased their bed capacity from 25 to 35 to as many as 50 beds if necessary. We've been able to supply the hospital with additional ventilators, those machines that are necessary to support people's dysfunctional breathing when they have COVID-19 infection, and we've been able to supply the hospital with additional ventilators that they may need. So we're trying to be proactive of getting the medical care system up and running in the event that we get a surge of COVID-19 patients. Right now, I think we're pretty well positioned, and I think California as a whole is pretty well positioned because of the early adoption and implementation of the social distancing measures, the suspension of mass gatherings, all of the shutdown and lockdown activities that we've been able to put into place early on, I think are paying off now when you compare California to other states. So the goal is, if we can continue to spread this out, we can prevent the hospital and the healthcare system from being overwhelmed with an influx of patients like they're seeing in other parts of the country back east, like New York, New Jersey, some states like the New Orleans area of Louisiana, Atlanta, the Detroit area. We don't want to be one of those states. In fact, California was able to send some of their ventilators that they received from something called the Strategic National Stockpile, which is a federal asset. California has been able to send some of those ventilators back east to where they're needed more acutely than we need right now, because we think that we are pretty well positioned to not get in a situation where we're completely underwater when it comes to a surge of coronavirus patients. But of course, we're watching this on a daily basis.
Okay. Supervisors, do you have any questions for Dr. K at this moment? Dr. Kaleda, when you say that you're going to be ordering, if I understood your word, the medical community in Calaveras to report, I wasn't clear what, the tests that they're doing or just patients who might be symptomatic?
Yes, patients who present with a specific constellation of symptoms that's called febrile respiratory illness. That's defined as a person who has a temperature of greater than 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit and cough or shortness of breath. If they see a patient, they log that on a spreadsheet, and at the end of every day, we will require the medical providers, and the local health department and the local health officer has the authorities under Title 17 to require the medical community to report communicable diseases that the health officer deems necessary. So we have the authority to require and even to mandate the local providers report that information to us on a daily basis of just people presenting with just that type of sickness, and use the symptoms that the person comes in with as a marker for coronavirus infection in the absence of a test that's necessary to confirm it. Right now, all we know are cases that have been confirmed with a test. And if testing capability is low, there may be people that we're not identifying because we can't test them. So by surveillance of these types of symptoms of febrile respiratory illness, we can get a truer reflection of disease activity that's occurring in the community on a daily basis in real time, and use that information to inform our predictions of the challenges that the healthcare system might be looking toward.
Got it. Thank you. Supervisors, if you have no questions or comments at this time before we go back to what Kristen's looking for, I would like to open this up to any public comments.
Madam Chair, can
Yes.
I just add one more comment? So I did want to, I think Dr. Kaleda just did a really great job of illustrating how multifaceted this response to COVID-19 is, right? It's not just the medical community. You're seeing the connections to housing and homelessness like we just went over earlier. You're seeing the economic impact. It's a very, very wide net that is being affected. And so I just wanted to kind of tie it all back to how this is one element that you're seeing in the COVID-19 response, what we're proposing today, and it does have multiple prongs. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do you have anyone on the line or any emails for public questions or comments?
We do not have any, Madam Chair.
Okay, now, being as all this is somewhat new, are we gonna maybe wait a couple of minutes?
That would be good.
Okay, I'm gonna wait a couple of minutes before I bring it back to the board for any direction. Mr. Stopper left, but I think it was just to go refill his coffee cup. Kristen, I'm going to ask you to be specific on those things that you would like direction on when I bring it back to the board.
Madam Chair, we have not had anybody call in or email, so if you would like to close public comment, that would probably be an appropriate time.
Good. We'll do public comment on this is closed. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Stranger, is it Miss or Mrs.?
It's Mrs.
Mrs. Stranger.
Whatever.
Could you please reiterate specifically where you might like direction from the board?
Sure. So the purpose of today's item was to provide an informational briefing, of which we just completed, and then also receive direct policy direction from the board if this is an appropriate project room key to continue to put our staff resources behind in order to implement locally in Calaveras County, being mindful of the fact that there will be a number of subsequent items that we'll have to bring to the board as appropriate. So that's the request.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Stopper.
I would like to support staff's recommendation moving forward. And I would also, with that, like to thank the different motels or hotels that have stepped up and offered their services to work with the county. This could be possibly beneficial for them moving forward, being able to get some revenue in while they aren't having tourists come to our area. So there might be two possibilities here that benefit our community. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other supervisors want to comment on this? Otherwise, I'll assume you give your support and concept to what Mrs. Stranger, Supervisor Garamendi.
I learned how to raise my hand on this. I'd like to echo what Supervisor Stopper said and thank Kristen and her staff and Dr. Clayton and everybody who's working hard on this. I support what staff is proposing, and it's an all of the above approach. We've got to take that. I also want to echo what Supervisor Stopper also said, that this is county is not forcing hotels to do this. These are contracts that are put together between willing participants, and I appreciate that these hotels are stepping up. Hopefully it'll help out economically as well as take care of the health of our community. So thank you very much, Kristen. I support this.
Any other comments from the supervisors? I agree with Supervisor Stopper, Supervisor Garamendi. This is something that I too support, and hopefully when it comes to the board for any action, we will, as council recommended, implement something that can expedite it and make it flexible to reach the goal that you're trying to do. Supervisor Mills.
Yeah, the point is, and thank you, Kristen, for bringing this up, that we also need to discuss, as we brought up before, how the funding mechanism is going to work. Hopefully in the next item, when we bring it before the as an agenda item, we'll include that so that she has that flexibility and latitude to be proactive in many ways, that the state is going to give her those opportunities to do it. I don't think we need to micromanage the details of this whole thing, but at the same time, we need to give her that ability to do what she needs to do within the timeframes. And there are some very tight time windows, I'm sure, with many of the things that they're asking for her to do.
Okay. Anything else? No. All right. Ms. Stranger, do you have your direction from the board? I believe you have support for what it is you're planning.
Yes, yes, I understand. Thank you to the board for this clear policy direction and for the comments that were made today that staff can ensure to build in as we roll out the implementation of this. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you. This item is closed. I want to move to supervisor announcements. Madam Clerk, did you want to?
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Do any of the supervisors have anything they would like to address? Or if you have anything you might like to share on what some of your constituents are saying about this challenging time we're in? No, well, I know we're all experiencing it, and to my colleagues, to tech services, and to the clerk to the board and the clerk recorder, thank you very much for putting this together. The learning process was probably the most difficult for the supervisors, but thank you very much, and we look forward to next week. Mr. Alt, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I do not.
Council? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. We will be going into closed session. No, we're not. We're going into closed session, and you're going to find out what happened next week. That's the teaser, so you'll have to tune in.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
would you like me to read the closed sessions and then open it for public comment?
Sure.
Okay. Item 2 on the closed session agenda, public employment pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, title County Council. Item 3, threat to public services or facilities pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, consultation with County Administrative Officer. Item 4, conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, County Designated Labor Negotiator Judy Hawkins regarding employee organizations, Calaveras County Sheriff's Management Unit, Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association, Calaveras County Deputy Sheriff's Association, and Service Employees International Union, and unrepresented employees. Would you like to take public comment on any of those closed sessions at this time?
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Now you're
All right. Is there any public comment in any one of those 3 items we will be discussing in closed session?
So it'll probably take just a moment for people to be calling in if they do want to make comments. So we should wait for a minute or 2.
Got it, we will. Okay. Supervisors, before we go into closed session, if you want to go get your coffee or what have you, please go ahead and then we will go into closed session. This meeting is adjourned.